It was early, the kind of morning where the sky still clung to its darkness, when Leonardo DiCaprio pulled into the battered lot of a small-town tire shop. No publicist. No polished car. Just Leo in a worn hoodie, a baseball cap pulled low, and a battered old SUV that had seen better years. Inside, the shop smelled like oil, dust, and black coffee left too long on the burner. "Back in a sec," someone shouted from behind a wall stacked with tires. Leo looked around. The place wasn't pretty. Bare concrete, scratched counters, old calendars curling off the walls. 3 men leaned against the back wall, sipping coffee, swapping jokes with the lazy confidence of people who thought they ruled the room, and then the 4th one appeared, younger. Maybe mid-20s. Short hair, tired eyes, hands already dirty with grease. And those boots, Leo noticed them immediately, cracked leather splitting at the seams, soles nearly detached, the right one wrapped clumsily with black electrical tape. Not a style choice. A survival one. One of the older mechanics muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Careful, kid, don't bust through the floor with those antiques." Laughter. Quick and careless, the young man said nothing. He just walked up to Leo, his posture straight but weighed down by something heavier than tired feet. "Morning. Name's Liam. What seems to be the problem?" Leo glanced past him for a second at the men still chuckling, then back to Liam. There was something about the way the kid stood there. Like he'd learned long ago that pride costs more than boots. And he wasn't about to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing him break. Another mechanic added with a smirk, "Maybe if he saves up, he can get shoes without holes next year." Leo kept his face neutral. Didn't smile. Didn't play along. He looked Liam straight in the eye and said, "Can you take a look now?" "Yeah," Liam said, voice low but firm. "Right away." As they headed out toward the SUV, the air behind them cracked with one last snicker, but Leo wasn't listening anymore. He heard something louder than laughter, the quiet drag of a ruined boot and the even louder strength of a man who kept walking anyway. Leo hadn't come here for a charity moment. He hadn't come here to play a role. But he knew standing next to that young man he was about to fix something a hell of a lot more important than a car. The laughter started again, sharper, nastier. "You sure you know which end of the wrench to use, princess? Maybe if you tape your boots a little tighter, you'll fix the truck faster." "Hell, kid, just ask the customer for a ride to the thrift store, might get you some new shoes for once." The words cut through the morning air like knives. Liam stiffened, his head low over the engine, hands trembling slightly around a wrench. He swallowed hard like a man swallowing stones, willing himself to keep breathing, keep working, keep pretending it didn't hurt. Leo watched him, watched every twitch, watched every breath Liam forced through his teeth just to stay standing, watched the way no one else in the shop cared enough to stop. The part of Leo that had learned patience the Hollywood-trained smile, the diplomacy he carried to press conferences, died right there. He moved, not rushed. Not flustered, slow. Heavy, each step across the cracked concrete louder than the last joke they had dared to spit. He stopped only inches from the 3 men leaning against the wall, still snickering like overgrown playground bullies. The closest one, a short, wiry guy with oil stains on his sleeves and a sneer frozen on his face, looked up, saw who was standing there. The smirk faltered. Before he could open his mouth, Leo spoke, voice low. Calm, sharp enough to get a man clean through. "You know," Leo said, tilting his head slightly, "it's funny." The 3 men blinked. "Funny," Leo continued, "how the loudest mouths always belong to the smallest men." The air tightened. "You think those boots are a joke?" Leo's voice dropped even lower, a blade slipping between ribs. "You think showing up day after day, hour after hour, in boots that probably hurt like hell makes him weak? None of them answered. Leo smiled, cold and merciless. It makes him something none of you will ever be. The wiry man tried to mutter something, a bad joke, a defense, but Leo didn't give him the space. You're not men, Leo said. You're scared little boys who never grew up, still thinking if you laugh hard enough, no one will notice how much you hate yourselves. The blood drained from their faces. Someone in the back dropped a wrench with a clatter. No one moved to pick it up. Leo took a step closer. You mock a man for working. You mock a man for wearing his struggle on his feet like a badge he didn't ask for, and you do it because you know you couldn't last a single day in those boots. Silence, thick, suffocating. You, Leo pointed slowly, methodically at each of them, are cowards. And you, he said, nodding toward Liam without even turning his head, are the only man in this building worth a damn. Liam stood frozen behind the truck, wrench still in hand, eyes wide like he was seeing the sun after too many years in the dark. Leo finally straightened, took a breath, and said the last thing those men would remember for a very, very long time. Real strength isn't laughing the loudest. It's standing the longest. Without another word, Leo turned on his heel and walked back toward Liam. The men didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even breathe too loudly. They had been stripped down to their bones, not with fists, not with shouting, but with truth, and nothing was heavier to carry than the truth. Leo reached Liam, who was still gripping the wrench too tightly. He clapped a hand on the kid's shoulder, solid, grounding. Finish the job, Leo said, voice quieter now. You're better than all of them combined. And he meant every word, because what Liam didn't know yet was that his story was just beginning, and Leo, he wasn't leaving that lot until he gave Liam a reason to believe in something a hell of a lot bigger than a paycheck. Liam went back to work like a man stitched together with stubbornness and shame. His hands moved, but slower now, not because he didn't know what he was doing, but because for the first time, someone had seen him, really seen him, and it rattled something deep. He didn't dare look at Leonardo again. Didn't dare meet the eyes of the men who had mocked him either, now silent, small, pinned in their own skin. He just worked, bolt after bolt. Tire after tire. Leo stood back by the truck, arms crossed, watching him, not like a boss, not like a celebrity sizing up a fan, like a man studying something precious. Fragile, and thinking how damn wrong it was that it had taken this long for anyone to notice. Liam's movements were quick, sharp, no wasted motion, the kind of efficiency that doesn't come from training videos or lectures. It comes from surviving, from knowing you can't afford mistakes, from knowing you can't afford replacements. From knowing you have to make broken things work because no one else is going to hand you a second chance. Leo's jaw tightened as he watched. He thought of all the rooms he'd been in, the golden ones, the velvet ones, the ones where men shook hands and smiled fake smiles and wore shoes that cost more than Liam probably made in 6 months, and yet none of them had ever stood straighter, or worked harder, than this kid with the taped-up boots and the hands full of scars. It wasn't fair. It wasn't even close, and Leo wasn't the kind of man who could see that and just walk away, while Liam finished up. Leo slipped quietly around the side of the building, phone in hand, called someone he trusted. No assistants, no managers, just a friend, someone who could make things happen, no questions asked. The conversation was short. Yeah, a truck. New. Good suspension. Something that'll last, and a full gear kit, everything a mechanic could dream of but would never afford. A pause. Leo glanced back at the kid hunched over the tire iron. And have it delivered here. Today. He hung up, when Liam finally finished, wiping sweat and grime off his forehead with the back of his wrist. He stood up straight and handed Leo a clipboard. All set, sir, he said, voice a little rough. She'll run smooth. Sorry again about the wait. Leo took the clipboard but he didn't sign it yet. Instead, he looked Liam straight in the eye. "Nothing to be sorry for," Leo said quietly. Liam swallowed. Blinked. Nodded stiffly like a man who didn't know what to do with kindness that didn't have a hook hidden inside it. Leo signed the papers. "Paid double." No argument, and then he added, casual like it was nothing, "Mind if I stick around for a little, got some other business coming through." Liam shrugged. "Sure. Up to you." He didn't expect anything, men like Liam never did that. He was already halfway back into the garage when the sound of tires crunching over the gravel lot made him turn. At a big, shining black pickup truck fresh off the lot, chrome gleaming in the dull morning light, rolled into view. Its engine purred like something alive and proud. It pulled right up next to Leo's beat-up SUV, and stopped. A delivery man stepped out, looked around awkwardly, then walked straight up to Leo. "You the one who ordered this?" Leo smiled, small and private. "Not for me," he said. He turned to Liam, whose hands had gone completely still, a wrench half raised, his mouth parting like he was about to say something and couldn't. "For you," Leo said. Liam blinked. "Once. Twice." "What?" he rasped. Leo walked toward him, slow and steady. "You work harder than anyone here," he said. "You stood taller than anyone else when it mattered. And nobody around you seemed to notice." Leo paused, letting the moment sit heavy between them. "But I did." He tossed the keys lightly into the air and Liam caught them on instinct, pure reflex, still staring, still not believing. "A man who shows up," Leo said, voice low, serious, full of the kind of respect money can't buy, "deserves a ride that shows up for him too." The other men, the ones who had laughed, hovered near the door, watching, too stunned to speak. Leo didn't spare them a glance. This wasn't for them. It was for the man who had kept standing when no one clapped, for the man who had survived ridicule without bitterness, for the man who had worked through broken shoes and broken promises and never once asked for a damn thing, and now he didn't have to. Liam stood there, the keys burning in his hand, eyes glassy but refusing to fall, because strength isn't about never breaking. It's about knowing what you're worth even when the world tries to tell you otherwise, and sometimes if you're lucky someone sees it too, someone like Leonardo DiCaprio. And sometimes Liam stood there long after the engine went quiet. The keys felt heavy in his hand, not because of the metal, because of what they meant. That he looked down at them, then back at the black truck gleaming in the sun, clean, powerful, solid, and for a long moment, he honestly didn't know what to do. His whole life had trained him to expect less. To take what was broken and patch it together with tape and grit and silent anger. To survive, not to hope that he wasn't built for gifts like this. His throat tightened painfully. The laughter of his coworkers still hung in the air, stale now, sour. They watched from the doorway, too far to hear what Leo had said, too close to pretend they hadn't seen. Liam could feel their eyes. Could feel all the years he spent apologizing for being visible, for being poor, for being tired, and for a second, just a second, he thought about giving it back. He thought about saying no, about shaking his head and walking away, because he didn't know if he could carry something this heavy. Not the truck, the meaning, the proof that maybe, just maybe, he was worth more than what they'd always told him. He turned toward Leonardo, voice rough when he finally forced it out. I don't know what to say." Leo just smiled. A small, tired smile, the kind you give a man you respect, not pity. "You don't have to say anything," Leo said simply, and somehow, that made it worse, made it harder to breathe, because Liam realized for the first time in years he didn't owe anyone an explanation for being here. Didn't owe anyone proof he deserved to stand. Someone had just decided he was enough, exactly as he was, boots and all. Liam turned the keys over once in his palm. The leather tape around his boot shifted as he moved, cracked, old, stubborn that he glanced down at it, and for the first time in his life. He didn't feel ashamed, that he felt proud, because those broken boots had carried him to this moment, through every joke, every long shift, every lonely walk home with nothing but $1 and silence in his pocket. They had survived, and so had he. That he walked toward the truck slowly, hands steady now that he climbed in, the leather seats groaned under him, fresh and new and unfamiliar. That he ran his fingers over the steering wheel, the dashboard, everything untouched, unclaimed, except by him now. That it still felt too big, but maybe, just maybe, he could grow into it. Leo leaned against the side of the shop, arms folded, watching .No fanfare, .No cameras, just a man giving another man what life should have given him long ago, a chance, and Liam saw it, saw the truth. The real gift wasn't the truck, it wasn't the keys, it wasn't even the respect, it was the way Leonardo DiCaprio looked at him and didn't see a charity case, or a project to fix, or a joke to laugh at. That he saw a man who had already won every fight that mattered. Just by still standing, Liam started the engine. That it rumbled to life beneath him, smooth, strong, steady. That he looked out the window, met Leo's eyes one last time, and for the first time in a long, long time he smiled, not because someone gave him something, because someone finally saw what was already his, worth. Even more rarely they do something about it. The truck rumbled low under Liam's hands, but the noise inside the shopyard was louder, not the sound of engines, not the clatter of tools, the silence of men. Left behind, the three mechanics, the ones who had laughed, jeered, tossed their cheap shots at a man wearing his survival on his feet, stood near the shop entrance now, frozen. They didn't look smug anymore, they looked like men who suddenly realized the walls they had built with mockery weren't enough to keep the truth out. Liam sat behind the wheel of a machine he would have never even dared dream about owning. His hands rested steady at 10 and 2. His cracked boots sat solidly on the polished pedals. For a second, he just sat there. He could have rushed off, bolted out of shame or fear, before anyone thought to take it back, but he didn't. Instead, he rolled down the window, leaned out slightly, and looked straight at the men who had mocked him. No anger, no insults, just a simple, steady look. A look that said everything. You tried to shrink me, you failed. You tried to shame me. I stood anyway. The men dropped their eyes, one by one. Like kids caught throwing stones at something they never understood. Liam put the truck into gear, the tires crunched over the gravel, slow at first, not racing away, but moving with deliberate weight. Each foot he drove was another foot between him and the smallness they had tried to trap him in, and the best part, he didn't even have to say a word. Leo watched it all from where he leaned against the wall, arms crossed, face calm. He didn't need a thank you. He didn't need a headline. This wasn't charity. It was setting the scales a little more right. He pushed off the wall, hands in his pockets, and started walking toward his own battered SUV without any fanfare. Before he reached it, he heard footsteps. Liam had stopped the truck halfway across the lot, gotten out, boots cracked, taped, stubborn, hitting the gravel hard. He jogged up to Leo, still clutching the keys loosely in one hand. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sky above them was huge and quiet, not quite blue yet, not quite broken. Finally, Liam said, voice raw but steady, I'll never be able to pay you back for this. Leo shook his head. You already did, he said. Liam frowned slightly, not understanding. Leo smiled, the real kind, the kind he saved for rare things. You didn't let them beat you. He clapped a hand on Liam's shoulder, solid, proud. That's worth more than anything you could ever hand me. Liam's throat burned, not from shame, not from fear, from the weight lifting off his chest, the weight he hadn't even known he'd been carrying his whole damn life. He nodded, not because he needed permission, but because he finally understood, he deserved to stand tall, not because someone gave him a truck, not because someone defended him, because he had been worth standing for all along, and someone had finally seen it. Leonardo DiCaprio didn't stay for applause. Didn't pose for photos. Didn't even wait to see Liam drive off into the horizon that he just got into his beat-up old SUV, the same battered car he'd driven in with and pulled away without a sound, leaving behind a man in a brand new truck and something even rarer, a man who no longer had to wonder if he was enough. He knew it now that he was. The first few days after the gift felt strange for Liam, not because he didn't love the truck but because, for the first time in his life, he walked into the shop and people moved out of his way, not sneering, not snickering, just stepping aside like they had to admit something they couldn't say aloud. You deserve more than what we gave you. Liam didn't rub it in. He didn't look for apologies. He didn't need them, because something deeper had shifted. For the first time, Liam didn't walk hunched, didn't lower his voice to make himself smaller. He took up space, and he didn't feel sorry for it. Not because Leonardo DiCaprio had handed him keys, not because he had something shiny to show off, because someone had looked at him, really looked, and said without words, "You are worth better." Weeks passed, then months. The jokes about his boots faded into the kind of silence that comes after a lost war. The men who used to laugh now nodded stiffly when they passed him. Some of them even muttered, "Morning," like they were remembering how to be decent. Liam never rubbed it in. He didn't have to. They knew. Work picked up. Not because Liam worked harder, he'd always given everything he had, but because word got around. The new customers didn't know the story, not exactly, but they felt something different when they dealt with him. The steady way he talked, the way he didn't rush or apologize when explaining a repair, the way he handed back change without looking embarrassed to exist. They trusted him, because you can always trust a man who carries dignity like it's welded into his spine. Somewhere across the country, Leonardo DiCaprio finished filming another project. He stood under different lights, on different carpets, with different questions thrown at him. He smiled. He posed. He moved through it all, but he never mentioned that dusty shop, that broken boy with the taped-up boots, that quiet morning when he chose to see a man instead of a punchline that he didn't need to, because real good leaves no fingerprints. It just changes people in ways you can't measure. One night, long after the shop closed, Liam sat in the front seat of the truck. The keys dangled from the ignition, untouched. He didn't drive anywhere. He just sat there, breathing in the smell of leather and metal and new beginnings. On the passenger seat, the old boots sat, the ones he couldn't bring himself to throw away. He ran a thumb along the torn leather, not with shame, with reverence, because they had carried him farther than anyone ever thought they would. And now they were retired, because Liam finally understood. You don't have to stay broken just because you learned how to survive broken. Sometime later, along quiet while later, Liam started fixing up old cars in his free time, not for money, not for fame. He fixed them for people like him, people who needed something solid when the rest of their life was falling apart, single moms whose vans broke down 2 days before school started, old men clinging to their dignity with a rusted pickup, teenagers whose cars barely made it to their first jobs. He charged what they could afford, sometimes nothing at all, because he knew in his blood what it felt like to have nowhere to turn and no one noticing. And if one truck could change his life, maybe he could change a few others, not with speeches, not with grand gestures, just by showing up, just by standing, the same way he always had. No newspaper ever wrote about him. No television crew ever showed up, but every once in a while when a kid pulled into the lot with a sputtering engine and a look of panic, Liam would see it again, the fear, the worry, the shrinking, and he'd do what Leo had done for him. He'd fix what was broken, without asking for a thank you, without making it about him, just fixing, just standing, just proving, quietly, that some of us are still built to carry others when the road breaks. If you ever pass through that dusty town, you might see a gleaming black truck parked outside the shop, and if you're lucky you might meet a man who greets you without judgment, listens without rushing, and helps without ever making you feel small. You'll know it's him by the way he stands, tall, steady, unapologetic. Like a man who was once handed more than a gift, he was handed the chance to remember what he'd been all along. Enough, the end. But for Liam and for anyone still taping their boots together in the dark, maybe it's just the beginning, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be the one standing tall next.